Is 9:31, and we almost have everyone here. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's October 27th at 9:31. Although it's not on the agenda, if there is no objection, I would ask that of those who are willing and able, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk.
Approve the minutes of the regular meeting on October 20th, 2020.
Has every member had a chance to look over the minutes? If so, is there any discussion of the minutes or proposed changes? If there is none, then I will make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. If there's no discussion on said motion, clerk will open a roll. Members will cast a vote.
I have a question.
There has been a question on the motion. With that,
To approve the minutes of the regular meeting and okay, for a second it said mine says motion to adjourn.
please
That's
don't
just the
adjourn.
default. Yeah.
What's the question? I didn't understand.
Oh, she's asking on the screen.
tablet.
It popped up as the motion was and correct me, Councilmember, if I'm wrong, but Councilmember, the motion on the screen said a motion to adjourn, but the motion is to accept the minutes. So she was looking for a point of clarification to ensure that voting yes wasn't going to now get us out of here. All right, so, but it has been clarified that this motion is to accept the minutes as printed. With that, it is a 7 yea to 0 nay, and the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items 1 through 12.
Has every member had a chance to review the consent agenda items? Is there any discussion on the consent agenda items? If there is no discussion or proposed changes to consent agenda items 1 through 12, I will make a motion to accept the consent agenda items.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. If there's no discussion on said motion, clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. For the result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated October 26, 2020.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance, here to present the Board of Bid recommendations. First engineering bid we have is paving Delaware to serve Valencia Edition Phase 3. Recommendation is to reject all bids. Sanitary sewer improvements to serve Brookfield Edition Phases 2A, 3A, and 3. No walk constructions for groups 1, 2, and 3 for an aggregate total of $174,163. Paving Harry Court, Willow Creek East, 4th Edition. Recommendation is Kansas Paving for $153,157.05. Wi-Fi installation at Rounds and Porter. Recommendation is Converge 1 for $65,578.65. This is the purchasing procurement website, as well as our current open request for proposals. That is the Board of Bids recommendations. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Other questions on the item? Is there discussion on the item? See none. If there's no questions or discussion, I will make a motion that we accept staff's recommended action to receive and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. If there's no discussion on said motion, clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk. Everyone okay?
No, the table keeps flopping down and hitting me in the knee, so it's all good.
Okay.
It won't lock back in place.
Okay.
Sorry. I thought I could do it quickly, but it's not holding.
Discussion of revisions to the city's drinking establishment restaurant entertainment establishment, after-hours establishment, and cereal malt beverage licensing ordinances.
So I called this to discussion only, and my thought with this is that as we no longer have the mask ordinance, we are partners instead with the county when it comes to following public orders, to start a discussion on how we could be better partners with the county as coronavirus numbers are rising, and also as we expect them to rise even more with people going inside, with flu season, with it getting colder. For those of you who were on a hospital call or follow the numbers, we have more hospitalizations right now in Wichita than ever before, at about 90 hospitalizations. So we know that the Board of Health makes all of the orders, the recommendations, but as the largest city, what is our role in ensuring that we can help when it comes to keeping our community safe? So before we discuss, I guess, the ordinance, and this might be my legislative background, where you put an ordinance or an idea on the table, and then it's an open discussion on more of the concept, which means we don't have to actually follow this ordinance or what's written. We can talk about getting to our goals and direct staff into possibly drafting something to be looked at a later date. I ran this ordinance past my small business council and this concept, and I will tell you, the response I got back, I actually personally am in agreement with, where this ordinance change might not be the way to go. It seemed like my small business council was more interested in a somewhat of a three-strike approach that focuses on education, encouragement, and as a last resort, enforcement. And this approach was more of a, if there was a direct violation of a health order, regardless what the health order was, and one of our firefighters or our police officers could reach out and actually educate the organization or the business of what the new order was, and if that wasn't enough to change it, then a letter would be sent. By the time the letter sends, that is the moment for due process, where the organization or the business can then say, hey, we are complying with public health orders, and that would be the time to do that. This letter is unfounded. And then in a third continuous violation of a public health order, and this is just a concept idea, would be to report it to Dr. Menz and to see if Dr. Menz recommends that the place would close for 24 hours and then open back up. It is a method that Topeka uses, and it's where I first heard of this was after discussion with the mayor of Topeka and how they partner with their county. So I wanted to just open up to discussion on this and not have the discussion over email or in the back, because I think that this is important that we share ideas and create that environment where we can, I guess, discuss potential legislative steps moving forward. Councilmember Bluebox.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm not on the hospital call, but I was under the understanding that a lot of our hospitalizations were going up because people were coming in from Oklahoma City, from Missouri, from other areas. We keep saying follow the science. I don't believe there's been an outbreak at the bars, so I guess I'd want to see what kind of data we have that say, people going out to bars is causing this. And the third item, I thought we were getting out of the health ordinances since we don't have a health department. I thought we were throwing that back over to the county and trying to work with them rather than coming up with separate rules ourselves. So that's my initial thoughts.
Okay, so I don't know how to make this more clear. The current ordinance pertains to bars. I have that on the table to start the global discussion about how it could be a better partner with the county in ensuring that public health policy is followed. During my small business council meeting, they also don't want to target an industry that's already been targeted. So if we have a more global, where it's organizations and businesses that after 2 strikes of being enforced, of being told, educated and encouraged, they still want to participate in dangerous behavior that violates a lawful order, what does that look like? What is the plan? So what we don't want is if numbers skyrocket to 25% and we have orders coming down from the county and they don't have the resources to educate and also encourage following those orders, can we step in knowing that it's still Wichitans who would wind up being affected by a larger outbreak? So that's the purpose of this. So I think we do have a responsibility to actually have this conversation, and we should have this conversation now before things get worse. We don't want things to the point where we have what other cities have gone through, and then we're scrambling in an emergency meeting trying to figure out how best to tackle these problems. So just to recap, this isn't the policy moving forward. I'm not recommending that we target bars and restaurants. Adding public health orders to the section in bars and restaurants that refer to upholding public health is in the spirit of having a liquor license, and that's why that change was proposed originally. It seemed like the least embracive way to encourage people to follow public health orders, regardless of about the coronavirus or what. But after referring to my small business council, it seemed that there was a desire to have the 3-strike approach and to not target one industry. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say I did reach out to 2 of the 5 county commissioners due to some recent public events. I was not able to consult with all of them, but the 2 that I spoke with didn't feel that this was warranted at this time. They also indicated that they serve as the Board of Health and that they have the content expertise and the staff to be able to utilize that we don't. So the feedback, like I said, I didn't speak in full disclosure with all 5, but 2 of the 5 said they didn't feel that this was necessary and they truly didn't understand it. The other thing I just wanted to mention was on October 22nd, the Wichita Eagle had an article where they stated what KDHE was reporting of where clusters were coming from across the state, and they categorized them not by community or by city, but by case, and restaurants and bars were not listed as a cluster across the state. So again, I'm just a little concerned that, this is kind of targeting one segment of our economy that we haven't seen clustering coming from so far. So just a few comments.
Okay. Is there anybody that is confused when I say that we need a more global policy that's not going to target one sector? And that although what's on here was originally discussing bars and restaurants, we want to have a more global conversation right now about other organizations or businesses more globally that might not know that these orders are changing. And also, I disagree with the idea that we have no role to play when it comes to public safety. But I don't know how I can be more clear about this, where we should be talking about a global way to educate and encourage public health orders coming down from the county, because their footprint within our city is not as large as ours. So should we actually play a role in ensuring that people know if they are in violation of a public health order, not saying that we need to step on their toes when it comes to the content or making those orders, but if they make those orders, should we be able to help educate and encourage following those orders? That is the question, and if so, what does that look like? Councilmember Clayco.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So just to be clear on what you're saying, you're suggesting that we not look at this proposed change to this ordinance rather look at a more global? Is that what you're
Yes,
proposing?
I want the discussion to be more global, and this proposed change, and a change in the ordinance, for those who haven't had a chance to read it, is adding public health orders pretty much under the sections of liquor and bar license that pertain to public health in general. But after conferring with the public and conferring with my small business council, it was agreed upon that we should have discussion about a more global approach, and they suggested more of a kind of 3-strike that focuses on education and encouragement, and at the very end, if someone is now in open defiance of public health orders, regardless what those orders are, then there'd be a mechanism to report that to the county.
Okay. So I did watch the Small Business Advisory Council meeting, and just a few things that I think came out of that. I don't know that I actually heard that they came up with that 3 strikes, but that's okay. I think what I heard from them, and again, not specifically, but I would, before we do anything, is that I would want to take this out to the larger community. And for example, when this was targeted at restaurants and bar owners, there's an Old Town Bar and Restaurant group that I think should definitely weigh in on this. The Kansas Hospitality Association, those businesses at the Chamber and WEBA that, and now that we want to go more global, or that you would like to go more global, I think I would really need input, because I don't think we know what the unintended consequences of something like this could be, and I can't think of all those. But I think the people that are in those businesses could. And then one of the things I really heard from your group was, why are we punishing businesses? Why would we shut down business for the behavior of a customer? And so I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that that, at least in my interpretation, was a really strong challenge that they made on that. And then I think, I know that this has been explained, but not in enough detail for my clarity, is just, could we get clarity from the county on their process if a business openly defies the health order? And I know it's a civil offense, and I understand all that. That's not what I don't understand. What I don't understand is exactly what that looks like, what the consequences of that are for a business, and how that would be enforced. Because if they have the ability to do that, and we are just saying, well, it's too hard, well, I don't know that it should be easy to shut down a business. So.
Right. So, okay, good. Now we're talking about actual policy. The goal is to figure out, all right, who should be at the table, and what we could do to have a role to play if we need to have a role to play. And to your I guess observation of the Small Business Council, yes, towards the end, this is not to punish a business, let's say, because someone's not wearing a mask. This is to discourage something like we saw in the beginning of the coronavirus, where we actually had a business, indoor, I think it was reported in the media as an indoor auction. And when they wanted to advertise a big indoor event, they were going to cram about 500 people into this one space. And then when our officers went out there to educate and say, hey, this is in direct violation of our public health order, they said, we don't care. It's not enforceable. We also, so in that situation, what are our options? If we put no plan in place and we wind up in a situation where an extreme situation, where something like that happens, well, what are our options? And that's what we got to talk about. That's what I'm trying to do. What I don't want, and really, I see why I think, why people from each side kind of bring it this way. I don't want this to be, this is a tough conversation to have. I don't want this to be you're doing too much or you're not doing enough discussion, where people are scoring political points. I'm opening this up to see, do we have a responsibility to our medical community? do we have a responsibility to Wichitans if numbers get worse and more orders come down, not necessarily about masks, but about anything, and our officers and our firefighters are out there and the stuff is being reported to them, that they have a mechanism to educate and encourage folks to follow these health orders. And if after doing that they're in open defiance, just like some people were early on, should we have a way to have a mechanism of enforcement of public health orders? Councilmember,
Could I just
Go
follow
for
up
it.
with that? So again, that goes back to my question about getting clarity from the county on their process. Because it sounds like you want to establish a process, but I'm not sure that there isn't already a process in place. That's my.
well, maybe the staff or county manager could tell us what their process is and if they even realistically have the resources to enforce in Wichita with us sitting on the sidelines. Mr. Manager, is there a process in place that the county has that we could be educated on if reports of, I guess, organized defiance of public health order come to the city, what is the process in which that could be addressed?
I'll work with the county manager to outline what their enforcement process is for their current order and future orders.
Are we aware of any enforcement that the county has been able to, or not even enforcement, but let's say educate and encourage, if they send out letters, have they been able to, I guess, have any type of reaction to any businesses that are knowingly putting the public in danger by violating their health orders?
I can't speak to that,
Okay.
but I'll get information from the county manager.
All right. Does anybody know of the county having the resources to I guess, address any openly defiant organizations or businesses or is it reasonable to believe that our officers have been the ones out there trying to educate and encourage order or following the lawful orders of the Board of Health? Okay. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Two things. One, I like the conversation about due process and trying to figure that out. I actually think this ordinance, even though this isn't the thing that we would be considering anymore, has a good process for due process and outlined in it. The other thing is, I am glad this is more of a global and not targeting one specific industry, but how I think we need to figure out how we will define that when we look at business registration. Like my wife and I have a business, we don't have to have a city license. So if there are businesses that don't have a city license, what does that look like? And then how far will that go? Like, are we talking everything from a small office to a grocery store, or are there more sectors that are more risky for exposure? Like trying to figure that piece out. And I don't know, personally, I don't know how we do that, especially with the business license piece. So I think that would be something we would need to consider as well after we hear what the county's procedures are.
And another thing I want to add, just the conversation that you've just mentioned reminds me of what we've talked about with my small business council. The goal also would be in extreme situations, right? It wouldn't be someone walking in without wearing a mask. Like, and I want to highlight that the goal would be in very extreme situations, and we should probably talk about or come up with some definition of what that is. where, you know, education and encouragement, the next step to that after due process, where like someone would actively be pretty much trying to be in defiance and to include members of the public in that. So we should have a conversation about what is that threshold? Because I think that some of your questions about, you know, just any general business, what constitutes a business, it's really the spirit of the discussion that I've had so far is more like I said, I don't mean to use this example too much, but the example during the shutdown where an owner wanted to endanger about 500 people stuffed into one room, and when was told, said they didn't care. They didn't care about the lawful order. They didn't care about if they were going to get in trouble with the police. They just, you know, didn't care. And then eventually the officers were able to talk to him and get that fixed, because education and encouragement is where you want to go. In those situations, that is an extreme example, right? How would we classify that? So it wouldn't just be, I think, utilized in a more, I guess, in a more common, we wouldn't want this to be commonly utilized. We would think that after learning about the health orders, people would abide by them.
So that's similar, I think, and Bob and Jennifer, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have that nuisance ordinance that I know we use in certain extreme circumstances. Is that something similar, or could this be a version of that without creating something new?
So that's what this ordinance was trying to do. So our ordinance, right, and I'm sorry, I'll kick to Jennifer, but just real quick, just for the background of this ordinance, where this came from, our current ordinance, section 14, kicks to the legislative definition of the nuisance ordinance, which has language that could be referring to public health orders. It's saying if you have a liquor license or a bar license, you also follow the nuisance ordinance, which means like you have a standard of keeping people healthy. By taking that language and putting it directly in ordinance, not just a reference to statute, that is what the original document was trying to do. But again, the goal was to not target one industry, because we don't, you know, there are a lot of people doing it right. You know, we don't want to do something that, I guess, demonizes them. But I apologize, I wanted to add that about.
Could you say the question again as to the ordinance?
Yeah.
You referenced the chronic ordinance. Is that what you're talking about? The chronic nuisance?
Yeah, the nuisance ordinance, this sounds like that. Is that the similar thing? And if not, could what the mayor's referencing maybe be integrated into that?
The city does have a chronic nuisance ordinance that's set forth by triggering events for a particular address. That's administered through the police department. There's a process in place for if a series of triggering events occur within a time period. WPD makes contact with the business owner, repeated contacts. If that doesn't work, then there's a conference set up or a meeting, and a nuisance abatement plan is put in place, and then the process continues through various enforcement techniques. That's what we have for chronic nuisances at this time.
If we were to, no, I'm not suggesting right now, but if we were to add the language that was added into this, so any public health order of Sedgwick County health officer or resolution of the Sedgwick County Board of Commissioners related to public health or safety, or executive order of the state of Kansas related to public health or safety, would that still be enforceable, or are we out of bounds on that?
That would be a policy decision on how to expand. If you want to look at the chronic nuisance ordinance, it's just a policy decision. It would need some discussion. It's a departure from what the chronic nuisance ordinance is drafted. It's for serious criminal activity, to repeated serious criminal activity, okay, as it stands now. But policy decision.
Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
So, and I was referring to the statutory definition that's already in the liquor license laws, and I'm unfamiliar with the ordinance but it sounds like there's already a process set up that's similar to the 3-strike, in which, and that's why I had these discussions, that's, if we already have a process, should a violation of a public health order be able to trigger that process? That might be a cleaner way to do it. So maybe directing staff to kind of give us those options if we choose to look into this more. Councilmember Bluebock.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, we've been throwing the term globally around, and, you know, I look up the definition, and that's how it relates to the whole world. And I'm thinking globally, I'm thinking we're elected to come up with policy procedures for the city of Wichita. So I'm just trying to frame it. I'm trying to understand.
We're not going to make a global policy that the rest of the world's going to follow.
Well, I mean, you keep using that term, so I'm trying to understand what we're doing. Are we trying to replicate a health department in the city? Because we have one in the county. You know, we're trying to reduce duplications. So it comes back to that point again as to, should we be doing this here, or the county has judicial powers that they should be able to exercise. So I keep questioning why we're trying to get into this, and I keep asking specifically, have we had an outbreak from the bars? We say, follow the science. Has there been anything that relates to the bars? And what I'm hearing from you is officers and enforcement. I feel like you want our officers to become mask police. And I think we need to think about that. What does that look like? Our officers going in and out of bars, checking people, you don't have your mask on, or it's not covering your nose, in an environment where people are already drinking. It seems to me like an opportunity to have a horrible viral video where somebody's trying to get a drunk outside of a bar because they don't have a mask on, and it just seems to create something very bad that we don't want. So I'm trying to understand the foundation for why you're pushing this.
I'm not sure if you're making political points or actually policy.
No, I'm asking questions that I want answers to.
Okay.
I'm not playing the political game.
No,
That's your game. That's your game to play the politics.
Sure. Or to enforce public health orders in a situation where we have more people who have died from a highly contagious virus than the flu in the last 10 years. Do you think that us confronting coronavirus head on, protecting our people, is a political game? Is that what you're accusing me of?
No, I'm accusing you.
Accuse me of what?
You made the accusation to me. I don't play political
So you want me to
games,
answer?
but you are the one that plays political games. So you're the one that brought that up.
So,
let's
let's dig deeper into this. So you seriously are asking if I am suggesting that a policy to help us enforce Sedgwick County health orders to stop a highly contagious virus that has already killed more people in Kansas than the flu has in the last 10 years. You're asking if I expect a global compliance, that I expect the entire world to comply with what we're doing here. That was a serious question?
I'm asking for simple causation versus correlation. You want to address the bars. I want to know where the problem is at the bars. Where's the outbreak at the bars? That's what's in your crosshairs. That's what you want to focus on. That's where you want to focus mask enforcement on. So let's talk about the outbreaks at the bars.
I don't know if I need the clerk to read back the statements that Brennan Johnson made that highlights that we aren't talking about the bars, and your citation of the word global means you probably heard when I reference a global policy, which means we don't want to demonize one industry over the other. And then the example I used wasn't a bar example. Do you have a text message? Wasn't a bar example. It was actually an example of someone who ran an indoor auction. So were you able to hear, was I clear when I communicated that as an example of something extreme that our officers had to deal with to help enforce the county health order, because that county health order affects our people here in Wichita because we're a part of the county. Our officers had to deal with that, but they don't have policy backing them that can help them in this unique situation. So your citation of the word global makes me think that you understood, unless you truly think that I think Europe is going to follow our Wichita ordinance, that I am referring to something more than just bars.
Then maybe you're misusing the definition, but I am here to discuss what we have in paper on our agenda. So whenever you come forth and say, that's not the direction I want to go. I'm trying to better understand.
Okay,
what you're-
well, like the vice mayor pointed out, we are in a conversation, a global conversation, which means that everything is on the table when it comes to where we should go as far as our role in preventing the spread of the most deadly virus our country has seen in over 100 years.
And if everything's on the table for the discussion, please help me better understand the causation and correlation between the outbreaks in the bars and the ordinance you've got in front of us.
As the vice mayor cited, which makes me indicate other people understood what I was saying, we're not focusing on the bars. We are focusing on a policy that is more globally enforced to industries outside the bars.
So you want Wichita Police to go in and be the mask police everywhere in the city, not just the bars, everywhere? You want us to actively use our resources when we have so many mental health issues, we have so many violence in our area, and you want Wichita Police, their top priority, to be out there making sure people have the mask on. Is that the direction we're going?
Madam Clerk, can you tell me if I use the word mask police or to police masks?
I can't read directly from the minutes because it's recorded.
Does anybody recall me saying mask police? When you bring up terminology that hasn't actually been said, then you are scoring a political point right now.
You brought up officers 5 different times, and how to regulate, how to manage, how to officers and enforcement. So
Right.
I'm the one that used the term.
Of
mask
healthcare
police.
orders, such as people who are in open and direct defiance, such as not the bar that was the example, because as already mentioned, my small business council, and it seems like the interest of the body is not to focus on one industry. You keep bringing up this one industry, and you keep bringing up masks, and I just want to know, is it because I haven't been clear that we are going to a bigger concept than that, maybe not use the word global, a bigger concept, or do you really think that like we are still on masking in bars?
No.
Okay, no, good.
No, don't cut me off, please. I said, are you trying to do the mask enforcement everywhere, right? Will you answer that question? Is that what do you want our officers to make a priority to be out doing mask enforcement other than mental health, DV, all the other issues we have, crime, everything else we have going on in our community?
So first of all, no, that's not what I'm asking. Second, I think that it is a real disservice to our officers to assume that they can do one thing, that they either have to focus on crime or focus on enforcing lawful policy or focus on helping folks with mental health issues. So I know to your question, but I also kind of reject the preface. You still have the floor.
I don't have any other questions. I mean, you haven't answered the ones I asked, so.
I wrote down your questions. Global, no. Global is a terminology I'm using to expand the concept of the policy beyond just bars and restaurants because I think they've been demonized and I don't want them shut down universally like they were earlier on, right? Like instead of punishing an entire industry, why don't we focus on educating and encouraging bad actors within certain industries?
I'm all about education and encouragement.
Okay.
That's where I want our crosshairs to be.
Very good. So global, we understand that. Your other question was about a health department. There is no suggestion of recreating a health department. We have a health department over in the county. Now the point is, the health department can make orders, but they don't have the same resources we do to educate and encourage, which is a concept you just agreed we should be doing. We have more people out there who can help educate and encourage, but at this moment, they don't have any guidance or direction for that.
I'm all about that.
Okay, so if we come up with a policy that can help guide encouragement and education with the resources we have as the largest city within the county, then that would help the overall, goal of keeping our community healthy. So no, I'm not trying to create another health department. I'm trying to help the one that's already created because we have more resources on the ground than they do. Bars, I think I already mentioned that. We are not targeting one industry over another. I know I used the word global to describe a larger concept of different sectors, and I don't mean to confuse anyone with that word, but I'm trying to refer to stuff such as that business that has been referenced early on that was not a bar, was just someone who wanted to be in direct defiance of the public health order that came down from the state, I believe, and also from the county, and our officers had to deal with that. Our officers are the ones usually on the scene who have to deal with this stuff, but right now we haven't given them the direction or the policy for the best way to deal with that. Once we have that discussion, and if we take action on it, then there will be a concrete blueprint that everyone will understand. And by people understanding it and being out there and actually know, what to expect, then we can get compliance because people buy into the plan. It's smart policy, and we should be doing that now before we're in a crisis situation. We have 90 people who are in our hospitals right now. To your other question, who's from out of state? I think 4 of them are. We have 90 people right now who are in hospitals. Our nurses have seen 2/3 more death this year alone than they have in previous years.
Those 90 people are residents of Wichita or Sedgwick County, other than the 4?
No, we also have to take on Butler County residents. We also have to take on surrounding counties as well.
I'm not on the call, you are.
Right,
But
no,
I
I'm-
keep hearing that the clusters are not from Wichita, and I don't have the evidence to know either way.
We're still dealing with it. It's still in our community. It's very tough to put up, to say that if you got people who are crossing into our county who get sick and wind up in our hospitals.
If we could share those numbers so the public has an accurate.
Your question though was
understanding.
about, or your understanding of I think a point that was made was that out of those 90, there was a large percentage from out of state. That's not true. There's about 4 of them, I believe. I could be wrong. I think it was about 4.
Okay, I'm going on the secondhand information I've had from the manager and from other people's staff. So
Right.
I'm not on the actual call. I don't see the actual numbers.
Do you have any other questions you'd like me to answer before I relinquish the floor to the next person online?
No, we have lots of colleagues who've been on here for 20 minutes. We want to have a public discussion, but you've
I
been
won't be
doing most of
accused
the
of
talking.
not
I think
answering your
it's-
question and then be ridiculed when I answered your question. Do you have another question, or can I give the floor to someone else? Thank you. Councilmember Tuttle.
I'm sorry, did you say Tuttle? Okay, sorry, I could not hear you. Thank you. I don't want to be redundant, but I just want to emphasize a few points, and then I have a question. At a Health Alliance meeting on October 2nd, there was an infectious disease physician from Wesley who stated that the 3 main clusters in Wichita are youth sports, churches, and family gatherings. So I'm just concerned that having even something that's not just targeting bars and restaurants, I understand that now, but targeting businesses really isn't getting to the root cause of the issue. Because youth sports, churches, and family gatherings are not businesses. My next concern, again, and I said this, but I want to reemphasize it, is I'm not sure if the county wants this or feels it's warranted. I think it's meant in the spirit of protecting the health of the community, which has been my work for the last 26 years. But I just want to make sure that we're proposing something that is actually a needed solution. Because it is targeting businesses of all sizes, I understand, not just bars and restaurants. I don't think we could proceed without the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce, the Wichita Independent Business Association, and other entities who represent the voice of businesses to make sure that we're getting it right. A comment was made that we have more resources than the county to be able to do that, and I'm not sure that that's an accurate statement. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just not sure. I know that our Wichita Police Department is already really busy protecting our community and public safety, so just would want to make sure how much time and treasure we have to allocate and what success would look like. And then my final question would be, I heard that we want to pass this in case there's an actual crisis, that we are being, preventive. And again, I appreciate the spirit of being preventive, but I would want to know what the threshold for that crisis is. So is it, how many businesses violate, then we kick it in? Is it how many cases, then we kick it in? I haven't heard anything about an actual threshold when this would happen, other than I heard the comment of when there's a crisis, and that's a very vague term. So just a few thoughts, but I guess the number one thing that I want to emphasize, and I probably will say this 10 more times, and I'm sorry, is we should not proceed with this unless we have consulted with the county to make sure that this is something that they feel is warranted and necessary and vital for the health of the community and that would augment the work that they're doing. So thank you.
Okay, so just recap then, we want to make sure the business community is at the table so that they can have buy-in, and also ensure that the county's at the table so we're in agreement. Is that a good recap? And then also put some standards and definitions in so that we all have a shared expectation on how and when this would be utilized.
Yeah, and I mentioned the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce and WEBA and others. I think so many times when we do work, not just us here at the Wichita City Council, but we talk about reaching out to the movers and shakers, and oftentimes we forget about the moved and the shaken. And by that I mean who's actually going to be impacted by this. What are the unintended consequences for businesses, for them trying to enforce, for our police department? So, I want us to just not think about key stakeholders, of course, the chamber and WEBA and the county, but also the moved and the shaken. Who's going to be impacted by this, and what would it mean to them, and what could be the unintended consequences?
Can we also get a review of the unintended consequences of not doing anything and having coronavirus spread throughout our county or our city, if public health orders designed to stop the spread aren't enforceable, or even to the point where we can educate and encourage following that? Maybe we can get staff to do a bit of an analysis of what the coronavirus has done so far to our local economy, and then an analysis that if the numbers continue to jump, what that economic impact would be on our businesses. Because my understanding, I think, is 1 out of 6 small businesses have closed so far. So if we're going to do an analysis for what would hopefully later be a policy discussion, not a debate, then maybe we can also have the other side, the economic impact as well. Councilmember Fryer.
So, a lot have been discussed here, and some motions are high. I hope we can dial it back and everyone just continue to focus on the task at hand.
Can you speak closer, Mike, or Brian?
Sorry, I got a table that's fallen down in front of my
Please
knees.
don't. Please don't.
So again, just to back up, I think emotions have been high for the last 30 minutes, and I think we need to focus on the task at hand, and that's doing what is best for Wichita and protecting our citizens and our businesses. The mayor said it himself, there are a lot of businesses doing things right and following the county health order. I believe the county has a process in place via civil actions in district court if there are willful violators that are just flaunting it and deciding to go against the health order. There's also the risk of liability if the orders are not followed. I think those two things should be enough alone for responsible businesses to comply. Now, I have no problem looking at the chronic nuisance ordinance to see if we can work without penalizing or unintended consequences for our businesses that are already struggling, but because of individual actions, they could be penalized. I don't think that's fair to our small businesses, to our main industry in town. We already know that retail, restaurant, hospitality is just facing a huge potential for closure. I've heard as high as 30% could fail. And if we continue to go down this road and there's unintended consequences without visiting with the county to see what they feel is necessary, they have a lot more coronavirus cares funding available to them than we do. And if they're not taking these steps because they feel it's fine, I don't know why we would continue to dip into an already strained budget that we don't have the ability to. So those are just a lot of concerns I think need to stay on focus, on task, as we have this discussion.
And I want to just highlight a point to make sure it makes it into the minutes clearly. The goal would be not to, I guess, penalize an organization or a business based on the actions of individuals outside of that organization. During my small business council, we had this discussion and we compared it to speeding, where, you know, people speed, you know, maybe go a few miles over here and there. That's not who we'd be looking at. We'd be looking at the people who are hosting and promoting a illegal drag race. Those are the ones we want to look at, the ones who are actually saying, I'm going to have a drag race right now that will endanger people driving and those others who are on the road, and I'm going to host that and make money off of it. Those would be the ones that I think we need to target, not just, you know, the smaller stuff. And I want to make that very clear that is what my intention is too, is in the extreme situation where someone is hosting a drag race, that should be handled differently. But I also agree that, you know, we should have, I guess, a partnership with the county. And not just that, I disagree with the idea that we secede our power to the county. The way it reads and the way other counties and cities interpret this is we don't secede our responsibility to the people of Wichita to the county on issues of public health. They absorb us. We're part of the solution. We're part of the plan. We can't just stay on the sideline and let the county handle it all when we also have boots on the ground. They do have the CARES Act money, but we also every week help administer the CARES Act money because we have housing department, we have complementary services that can help utilize these or structures that can help utilize this money for better service. So that's what I'm wondering when it comes to ensuring that we have education and encouragement. Should we also be taking a part in that as well? And I get coronavirus is a politically charged topic, but also, you know, it's also a public health issue. And you know, I don't think that we can just sit on the sidelines and just say, I can't just let my county commissioner handle this, right? Like, if I'm also the mayor. So do we have a role to play? And that's the discussion today. And I'd rather this discussion happen in public, and that's why we're having it in public. And I'm glad that it's going into more of a policy discussion and less of a debate.
Right, but I don't think anybody on this council members, feels that it's our role to maintain this crisis. We need to work together with our partners at the county, who is the health department, and give us their best knowledge and information and resource to how they feel they should address this, because that is the way it's set up. I'm not seceding our place. That is the place right now.
Wait, so you're acknowledging then that we don't have a role as a city of Wichita, and we're not seceding that is the place? Is that an acknowledgement that we don't have a place?
No, I said we should work together with them.
Okay. Okay, so moving forward, if we come up with a policy, it should be in collaboration with the county.
Again, continue the discussions. If it gets to a policy level, that's fine. But at this point, they have not even been part of the discussion as relates to policy. So that could be a result, but at this point, we don't know.
Right, we got to start the discussion.
Before we get to policy adoption, correct.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to add that I like the dialogue we've had. If the body wants to go forward with this, maybe we'd have a workshop that would take in the Vice Mayor's suggestion of reviewing the county policy to see how that compares to the discussion today. Councilmember Tuttle's suggestion of getting our partners' input as well, and then seeing if there are any gaps, and just have that as a workshop where we could have further discussion.
Can we invite the county over? To a workshop. I know it's a French word that I always butcher, so I'll defer to the manager. But can we invite and come up? And the goal is, like I said, these numbers are going to shoot up. We got a few months that we got to really work to protect our most vulnerable citizens. Maybe there'll be a policy that comes in place that, you know, we don't even have to implement it if vaccines and better medication comes out. But if we could get a joint meeting, a joint workshop, and try to dual out roles, I guess, that would, and let them know that we're here to help them. Could we set that up?
Mayor, the council has had en banc sessions with the county commission before. If I could suggest an alternative, though, instead of trying to make policy at an en banc session, perhaps what we could do is what I think I've heard several of you ask for, and that is that we work with the county staff to determine where the gaps are in enforcement right now, and then see what their suggestions are on how the city could come alongside and help if there are gaps. And then at that point, we can present that to both the county commission and the city council. And if there's a need for an en banc to have further discussions, you could do that. But I think first let's determine, what their enforcement abilities are and whether or not there is a need, for us to be involved.
Okay. And that'd be the first step then, and we can have a report back. Because it seems like, there is some overlap and some stuff that we could handle if we're already on the scenes that wouldn't use taxpayer money by getting someone out from the county on the scene. And overall, we can have a collaborative approach. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize again that if we're having discussions with the county, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to proceed with something. We're going to see if they need something and then proceed. So I think that's just something that's critical. We can't just say we're going to talk to the county and then keep moving forward. That's, I don't think, what anybody wants to see happen. And then again, I don't want it to get lost. I really would be challenged to support something that doesn't have a threshold of when this ordinance would kick in. So just to reemphasize that. So look forward to more conversations in the future with the county to see what their needs are and if we can possibly be helpful to them. Thank you.
And also, I actually disagree with the last statement. And Manager, I'd like you to also look into not just what the county needs are, but what our community needs are. And if what their needs are, what they expect, does that actually meet the community needs of helping them subdue this virus? Does that meet with our healthcare community's needs? I see us as equal players with the county. We don't work for them, so I want to work with them. But if they tell us not to do something, they got to cover that then. We're just not going to stand by and let people get sick. Other discussion? Good, I think that went well. Moving forward, I'm hoping...
Your definition of well is interesting.
Well, I mean, and to be honest, I know this might scare people. I want more of this, and I'm wondering we can have perhaps Fridays, and I'm going to throw this out there, but I'm going to do it now in public so everyone knows. When we have our short meetings where we discuss what the agenda will be, can we possibly keep about 15, 20 minutes during that public meeting where members can share ideas, we can have policy ideas bounced around. I want to create the culture in which we can openly discuss policy without having a debate, just going back and forth with ideas for the betterment of our community, and not just relying, I think, on staff presenting us stuff or trying to have those discussions through email where not everyone can see that. So that's my thought moving forward, is instead of doing it from the bench where during a meeting, if we could take advantage of some of that time on Friday where it's usually a pretty short meeting, but we're all there, maybe we can add something to the agenda where we'll have open discussion about policy ideas or stuff we're hearing that we can all work on. So I wanted to float that out there. Brian Fry is on the board. Councilmember Fry.
Just to follow up on that, Mayor, I don't think we've done enough of it in the last 10 months of one-on-one discussions between council members as relates to policy and ideas. I don't think everything has to be done at a workshop or at council. There's always been great conversations in the past when council members, mayor, council members, etc., have discussions and dialogue individually, in groups of two, not serial meetings, but open discussion among peers. That needs to return. We need to have more of that, and it takes everybody coming to the table, sharing opinions, ideas, solutions, and we can't operate in a vacuum. This community is facing the greatest challenge we've ever faced. Our economy is at an all-time risk. It's going to take maybe 8 years or longer to get our GDP back to where it needs to be. We've talked about the small business struggle. Those are the type of things that we need to be focusing on as well, and we've barely touched that. So I encourage all of us to do a better job of talking and sharing with each other and not just at open meetings like this. I'm not suggesting COMA violations are private, but just better dialogue and peer discussion.
No, I agree. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I just have a question for legal. Jennifer, the mayor proposed that after agenda reviews, which are every Friday at 11, if we're going to have a council meeting, that we have some sort of open discussion, policy discussions. Can you just, I'm asking a question I do not know the answer to. There's absolutely no judgment in this. I'm just super curious. Is that something we could do? Because we always have to, can we just have open policy discussions, and then how would the community know what the agenda is? I'm just, and you don't have to answer everything right now. Maybe this is something we look into, but I just want to be cautious of promising the community that could be something that happened and then we can't deliver because we actually can't do it. So.
Well, of course, these meetings are open to the public, so that's the key. The first thing is that we comply with the Kansas Open Meetings Act. Those meetings have the opportunity for some informal discussion. No vote or binding action could be taken, of course, and we can look further into the ordinances to see what constitutes our meeting and our agenda process. But I think those meetings, as long as they're open, that's the key.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, well, Madam Clerk, with that, we're obviously just discussing this, so there's no action to take on it. So I believe we'll just go on to the next discussion. I believe it's ended. There's no one left on the speaker list. Madam Clerk?
Council member appointments and comments.
Are there appointments that anyone would like to make at this time? And if not, we can jump into comments. I got Councilmember Tuttle on the list.
Thank you, and I think I still see him here, but Director of Public Works and Utilities, Alan King, is with us today. And this morning when I was driving to work again, I saw the city crew out making sure that our roads were safe. On Sunday, I saw that they had put some of the de-icing things out getting ready. So just want to give a shout out to our Public Works and Utility team who get up really early and make sure that we can all get around the city to do the business and education and fun things that we want to do. So thank you to them, and I hope they continue to stay safe as we have some more inclement weather today.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Taking a page out of Councilmember Tuttle's book, as she brought up Public Works, we just broke ground on the new water treatment facility, and we heard how great our staff was in making that process seamless. So just wanted to shout out Public Works and Utilities for all their help on that project as well.
Other comments? So we are not going to adjourn. We're actually going to recess this meeting, and then we're going to jump into the city council workshop, because afterwards, I believe members are interested in going into a executive session, which has to be called during the actual meeting. So at which we will recess until the council workshop has ended, and then come back to the normal actionable meeting, in which I believe there will be a motion made to go into executive session. Is there any questions on that? It's a bit of a change from our normal routine. All right, so barring no objections. With that, we will get into our city council workshop. The chair recognizes our manager, Layton, to run the show. The floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. The first item that we have actually comes from a council that was appointed by the mayor and called the Council on Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights. It was co-chaired by Councilmember Johnson. I don't know if either of you want to make introductory comments before the council's report is presented to the council, or whether you want to make comments at the end. Leave it up to you.
Defer to Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. This group really worked really hard to come up with some thoughts and ideas around how this could potentially become a permanent board for the city of Wichita. Great dialogues, breaking into subcommittees, got a lot out of it. Really like the product that we have in front of us, and looking forward to hearing the presentation today.
And I just want to thank the members who did serve with us, council, and also, of course, to Wichita State University's Public Policy and Management Center, who helped us really take the information from the council and turn it into the presentation we have today. So thank you so much.
The committee was staffed by the Wichita State University's Public Policy and Management Center. Misty Bruckner and LaShonda Garnes from the center, I think, are going to kick off the presentation, and there are members of the council that I believe are also going to assist in the presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Misty.
Welcome and good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, City Council members. I'm Misty Bruckner from the Wichita State Public Policy and Management Center, and want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My role is the easy role today. I have two things that I need to do. One is to just thank you, and I'm doing that globally in the effort of saying that I appreciate you serving. These are not what we signed up for in 2020, and we are always here to support public service. It's our job at the center to thank you for all of that, and want to do so just sincerely through the elected leaders and the staff for your service to our community. Second, I want to thank you for leading on this issue of equity and diversity and inclusion, and to bring this forward and to move our community forward. I want to especially thank the mayor and Councilmember Johnson for co-chairing this effort, and also the volunteers who took time in a 3-month period to meet 6 or 7 times, who did homework before. And when we talk about public service, right, it's also our community members stepping up and doing this work, and just want to give my appreciation for all of them for doing that. My second task today is to really to help talk about what the policy ask is for you from this. This council met during the summer, and the main policy question before you is to work with your staff and legal to create an ongoing advisory board. This is not work that is done in a 3-month time period, but to create a permanent structure that could be appointed by city council members and mayor to continue to move this work forward and take the blueprint and the issues and the topics that were defined by this council to move forward in a permanent advisory group. So that is the ask for you today. That's all I am doing here today. LaShonda Garnes from our team did the heavy lifting, and so she's going to come up and talk to you more about that.
Welcome.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As Missy stated, I am LaShonda Garnes, the Community Development Manager at the Public Policy and Management Center. We engaged in this work after the mayor had the opportunity to appoint community leaders to really come together to talk about the importance of this issue around diversity and inclusion and civil rights. In engaging in this process, we recognized that there was a short period of time that we had available to us to do some very intentional work around developing a purpose for this committee, as well as looking at opportunities to pick their minds and brains about what is important to the community as this work moves forward. Our work and our process included facilitated meetings with the full council. Those groups came together to talk about this work very intentionally, and recognizing in our first engagement, we recognized that there were a variety of topics that they wanted to talk about that they thought were important. And so our second step in this process was to ask a survey question to help us pull together some focus areas to be very intentional about bringing this work in a more focused way that allows them to work in smaller teams to develop some strategies or thoughts that could influence long-term work, recognizing that this short period of time really was not enough time for us to do the deep dive into developing a report or strategies that could be done in a way that is collaborative with the work that is happening internally and with partners in the community. So our survey question really was one question to ask the committee what they believed would be 3 strategic areas for the council to focus on. The idea is that we wanted to bring together all of the thoughts and see if we could identify themes that each of them were talking about that would allow us to raise up to some higher level focus areas. That survey led to 3 focus areas, the first being equity in policy, programs, and services, the second being talent retention, attraction, and advancement, and the third being community engagement and partnerships. The 4th work team that we created based off of this work led us to the purpose and governance structure. What we wanted to do is make sure that there was clear purpose for why this advisory board should move forward, as well as begin the framework for developing a governance structure that would mirror or mimic other advisory councils that were established by the city of Wichita through ordinance. And so what we want to do at this point is we have committee members here with us today. LaWanda DeShazier will talk about equity in policy, programs, and services. Alicia Sanchez was going to be here on today but had an emergency, and so I will share her remarks regarding talent retention, attraction, and advancement. Kinsey Borland is here to talk about the work of community engagement and partnerships, and Dalton Glasscock will join us to talk about purpose and governance. And I will come back and wrap us up and then stand for questions that you may have regarding the work that this committee completed.
Welcome.
Well, good morning, council members, mayor, city manager, and staff, and thank you for the opportunity to talk on such an important issue. And again, my name is LaWanda DeShazier, and I'm gonna read my statement, then I'm gonna give you my passion statement afterwards, okay? All right. So I was excited to be appointed to the committee. I was even more excited working on the equity in policy, services, and programs area because that is where my passion is, ensuring equity across the board for those that work, live, and play in the city of Wichita. And every program and service that the city provides always has a baseline of a policy, so that's where I really wanted to focus in on the policies. We know that the city has already done work in the area of diversity and inclusion, and that work can be expounded upon. By looking from an equitable lens at policies, programs, and services, we can not only define, but also measure progress made in enhancing diversity and inclusion. We know what gets measured gets done. The committee came up with several suggestions for starting points of measurement, and I'm certain that once a board is formalized, they will be able to begin the work. So partnering to authentically engage in opportunities to drive change by looking from that same equitable lens. Who do we hire? Who do we promote? What services do we offer? How do we administer those services? How is our customer service? How do we decide what services to even offer? Moving forward, when creating annual budgets, we can even measure from an equitable standpoint where the money goes, and where we care about is what we fund. So the city of Wichita is one of the most recognizable brands in our communities. What the city does, others will emulate. If the city makes a bold statement about diversity and inclusion, if the city puts in additional measures to look at ensuring equity in policies, programs, and services, we are very hopeful that other entities will do the same. There's opportunity for us to grow and learn from one another, and with that in mind, on behalf of the subcommittee that I worked on, we formally are asking you guys to make this committee a formal board. And so that's my written statement. So the part that I really want to emphasize is that COVID has showed us some things. 2020 has showed us some things, that there are gaps in some services. There are gaps in how people perceive the services they get. And so when we take a deep dive at looking at equity and policies and programs and services, it allows us to fill in those gaps. It allows us to take a look at our whole communities and see what can we do better. It allows us to look at who are we hiring? What does the top level of management looks like at the city of Wichita as opposed to the entry level? What does those things look like? And we have to take the time to really look at those things. We have to take the time to look at the equity that the city of Wichita has put into their programs and services. And I am really confident that if the city of Wichita set the bar, other entities in our communities will follow. Because like I said, this is one of the most recognizable brands in our city. It is the city of Wichita. And so again, if we can make this a formal board, like I said, we worked in 90 days, we put in a lot of time and a lot of effort. This needs to be an ongoing board so that the work can continue, grow, enhance, and make city of Wichita a better place to live, work, and play.
Thank you.
Well, LaWanda's passion dived into the talent aspect of this work, and so I'll make this quick. The Talent Retention and Attraction and Advancement Work Team really worked on thinking about the internal and external focus of promoting opportunities to attract and retain the diverse talent. I think this is an extended conversation that has been happening in the community, as well as supporting development opportunities and pathways for all staff, and to promote programs and opportunities that engage young adults in local government. That was a theme that came out of many of the work teams in thinking about how do we take this opportunity to also infuse our young adults as we think about retaining our talent in this community. How do we start to engage them at an early age? One of the comments that she sent to me in relationship to her remarks is in relationship to making sure that we understand that this work is a long-term intentional effort that needs to occur, that she too agrees that the work done over the 90 days was a great start, but there is some intentional work that will take us 2 to 3 years to truly accomplish if we want to make progress in this area.
Thank you. Welcome. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kinsey Borland. I'm multicultural. I grew up in Wichita, and I was honored to serve on the board where I worked on community engagement and partnerships. And a brief summary of kind of what we did was we wanted to create long-term support for youth and youth adult activity service so that they have a sense of community for all residents, and partner with organizations to promote diversity and inclusion in the community. Community engagement is kind of my life's work. It's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And growing up, I grew up in a Catholic church and a Catholic school. Loved my experience, but was very limited in diversity. And I grew up thinking, why does nobody in these positions look like me? And why is there no representation for multicultural youth here? And I think as it's gone on, it's gotten better and better, but Wichita is at a great risk of losing its young people to other cities. A great risk. My friends are leaving, my diverse friends are leaving. They don't feel valued here. And I think the long-term work is needed in Wichita to set that path for other cities to look at. We can be a stepping stone, for other cities to look upon and be like, I want to be like Wichita, because they value their diverse youth. They value those college students that could go to a city like San Francisco or Portland, and they choose to stay here because they feel valued. So I just wanted to emphasize, I think, making this a permanent, long-lasting board is really important because these youth are the future, and if you lose them, you're going to end up losing a really good sector of Wichita in the economy, in the community, and everything else. So, that's this is the first time I've ever done anything like this. I'm only 23, so it was an honor to serve on the board, and thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you. The adult Mr.
Hello,
Glasscock, welcome.
good morning, Mayor and City Council, and good morning to the staff as well. I have the exciting task of presenting the purpose, governance, and wordsmithing aspect, because that's the most exciting part that a committee can do. When we started the committee, the mayor walked in and showed us a painting, and it was a jumble painting of a mess everywhere, and that's kind of how the committee started at first. Wichita State was able to bring the structure to the organization, and we want to expand on that as we move forward, moving into this as well. And I would just want to compliment the work that Wichita State did. LaShonda and Missy were phenomenal advocates, and really anything that has their touch to it, I think is going to be a quality product, and I think you'll see that in what we did. You've heard about the important tasks that the other committees had, and really our task was to figure out a way to take those things and move them in a direction that we could have lasting effects in our community. And I think that's what we did on the purpose and governance direction. We saw ourselves as kind of, this is the purpose and the North Star that we wanted to move towards, and I think that we were able to do that. And I know we've all sat on committees where we just sit on the committee. A lot of work doesn't get done, and I know that everybody on the committee, that is the last thing we want to happen. And I think adding this structure and this focus and the way that Wichita State has allowed us to present that, I think is going to be a suitable way to move forward as well. Really the three things that we hit on this committee: one, we want to include all voices from all backgrounds, from all districts, from all beliefs, of all disabilities, sex, age, really race, everything that you can possibly think of, and I think we did that as well. In addition, we wanted people committed that were both experts in their field, but also community voices as well. And we wanted clearly defined duties, particularly the empowerment of the executive board, to make sure that this is a lasting committee. And we wanted to establish a common language. I know many of us are familiar with KLC programs. I think the reason that they're successful is that we have a common language, and I think we did that in this presentation as well. Finally, we want everybody in our community to be empowered, and every district and every council member to have a voice in who they appoint to the committee as well, similar to ways that we do that across all of our other committees. I started my volunteer time with the City of Wichita and the Mayor's Youth Council. I was able to serve on the Bicycle Steering Committee and then on 2 district advisory boards. And I think the work that's going to be done with this council will positively affect all of those organizations as well moving forward, and making sure those organizations represent our community. And so, like so many people said today, we want Wichita to be the best place to live, work, learn, play. I think this work that the committee has done and the work that the Purpose and Governance Committee has done will push us forward to that as well. So thanks for hearing us out today.
Thank you, sir.
So that is the range of the work that was done through this committee over the last 90 days. Again, this committee really focused on identifying the focus areas that they thought were important to help move this work forward, recognizing that they needed more time, recognizing that they wanted this to be an opportunity for collaboration and partnership with the City of Wichita as they did the internal work that's necessary to move this forward. The committee's work has led to this formal ask of formalizing and establishing an advisory board through a city ordinance, recognizing that this work takes intention, this work takes time. I want to just reiterate what Misty shared earlier and thank both the mayor and Councilmember Brandon Johnson for leading the task, allowing us to be a part of this engagement, as well as all of the work of the committee as they dedicated countless hours to help us get to the point we are today, to even make the recommendation and or ask for a formalized board to lead this work. And with that, I will stand for any questions you may have.
Questions? Yeah, Councilmember
So
Frye.
has the ordinance been drafted and getting prepared for us to review, or is it still in legal?
A draft ordinance is included with the report. Law Department is going to refine that. You don't have it with a PowerPoint, but with the committee's report. Law Department will finalize that, and we can bring that forward if that's the direction, general direction we get today.
Blue Block had his hand up, then we'll go to Johnson.
I just had a question. I appreciate everybody's time. I know you guys put a lot of time into this. I do appreciate it. I've heard one of the speakers spoke about the definition and then measurement, and that they had measurements. Did we hear what those measurements were?
So during the committee's work, they did not create specific measurements. That is one of the strategies that they have identified that would be necessary to show the effects of this work long-term. So if an advisory board was established, that would be part of the work that they would be doing within this first year of establishing the framework that would allow the city to measure the impact that this board, as well as the work that the city is doing, is making directly in the community.
Do we have any idea what we'd be measuring?
Councilmember Bluebaum, Council. It's going to depend on what the committee decides its priorities are and what they want to tackle as their work program for short-term and long-term. What we will do if the committee is established is work with them. Once they establish the priorities, then we will work on the metrics or establishing what success looks like and what we'll measure in order to determine success.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a few thank yous myself. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership in getting this going and created. I want to thank PPMC, Misty and LaShonda for all your hard work and all the phone calls we had to get this going, and then LaWanda, Dalton, and Kinsey for showing up today and all the work that you all did. Definitely appreciate that. Personally, I think that this opportunity before us, should we approve it, can do a lot of good in Wichita. I've thought quite a bit about our trip last year. I think that was last year, city to city to San Antonio, and learning about some of the equitable spending and other policies that they had and listening to their mayor. And I think that this affords us an opportunity to do similar work in Wichita. And of course, I always say we can do it better in Wichita. So I think this is a good starting point for us. So again, I appreciate all the work that has led to today and looking forward to seeing this come before council.
Vice Mayor Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. I also just want to, I want to thank the members of the Council on Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights. And thank you for those of you that are here today, Misty, LaShonda, LaWanda, and Kinsey, and Dalton. I tuned in a few times to the meetings and really appreciate the volunteers' commitment to the work to move our community forward. So thank you for that work.
Is there any more discussion? See none. Did you have a closing statement, or are we going to move on to the next item? Very good. Thank you. Mr. Manager, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Assuming that we got a positive response there, we will be bringing an ordinance forward for your consideration.
Bob, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
And so just to make sure I understand, so the ordinance will just be the establishment of this as a formal board within the city of Wichita structure, not the work plan or any other information that we receive?
That's correct. The work program will be, or work plan will be given to the committee after it's established by the council as a starting point for their consideration. But they'll determine their final short-term and long-term priorities and work program.
Okay, just want to make sure that the community understands that, so thank you.
Okay. All right.
Now on to the hot topic issue.
Next item has to do with fireworks, and the council approved the general, or gave us guidance for the 2020 fireworks program, which included some additional enforcement and a different approach on enforcement. Chief Tammy Snow's here to talk about what transpired during the 2020 4th of July holiday, and bring some final thoughts and maybe some recommendations for the 2021 program for your consideration.
Good morning, excuse me. Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. Tammy Snow, Fire Chief. Today I'm here to provide for you a recap of the 2020 firework activities. The fire department responded to 63 firework-related calls, which resulted in an excess of $109,000 in loss this past year. 7 of those out of the 63 were structure fires. 16 were non-structure fires, basically dumpster fires, and the rest were miscellaneous calls. And out of the miscellaneous calls, the majority of those were grass, brush, types of calls. Do have an error on the slide. It says we had 51 injuries. We only had 46, so my apologies for not catching that.
And Chief Snow, could I just ask a real quick question? I'm
Sure.
sorry to interrupt, but just so I don't have to have you go back. It says responded to 63 firework-related calls, $109,400 in loss. Can you explain what the loss is in that?
Yes, the loss would be structural losses, homes, interior contents, those types of things.
Thank you. Just wanted to confirm.
Sure. This year we had 1,013 complaint calls from July 1st to July 5th within the city of Wichita. Those are specific for city of Wichita. And we issued 75 citations for the illegal fireworks. This next slide, what you see here is a comparison. It takes the fireworks for the past 5 years, and it compares everything from your structure fires, your non-structure fires like I referred to, or your dumpster fires, vehicle boat fires, playground equipment, fences, explosions, citizens' complaints, grass, trees. It gives you the totals for each one of the years for the past 5 years, and also the losses that were incurred in those past 5 years. The next slide is in reference to injuries and complaints. And again, it gives you a 5-year comparison. It gives you the age range of those that were injured, their genders, and then also references the complaint calls. Please note that in 2020, July 4th fell on a Saturday, and since 2020 was also a leap year, 2019 was on a Thursday. Just a point of reference as we move forward. As far as firework enforcement, the fire department partnered with the police department, and we deployed personnel out on 2 evenings, July 3rd and July 4th. So this year it would have been, since July 4th was on a Saturday, it was both a Friday and a Saturday. We put together 7 teams, enforcement teams, and they were composed of 3 members, 2 police officers and 1 firefighter. And we identified the hot spots within the city of Wichita, and that's where we sent them to. And then we also deployed, this year we tried something new. We deployed 2 what we call complaint teams, and they were just roving teams. They looked at their CAD, computer-aided dispatch, their monitor, and they'd identify where the complaints were, and they tried to go to those complaints and do some mitigation there. We wrote 75 citations this year, and we initiated 374 times in which we just self-initiated contact citizens with the primary purpose of trying to educate them more so than provide them citations. The next slide is in reference to a citation. It gives you a comparison of the last 5 years on how many citations were adopted. Please note here in 2018 is when we adopted the new ordinance, which added the element of enforcement, so you can see the difference in the number of citations written. This gives you an idea of what the areas, the hotspot areas for 2019, what we identified. It also provides you where complaint calls came from, and also the little green dots are basically where fireworks citations were written as we were transversing throughout the community. And then here's a comparison of 2020, what it looked like. Same things, taking a look at those same exact things. As far as financial considerations, we yielded, as far as fireworks sales, $42,000. We had 28 tents this year versus in 2019 we had 30 tents. The enforcement costs were a little higher this year because we added 2 additional teams, the complaint teams. So in excess, right around $29,000. We yielded a net margin of $13,396. I cannot give you an accurate number on the last one because it's based on the collection of citations. And with our current situation and the court systems being shut down for a period of time, we don't have an accurate count yet. But if we were able to collect on all the citations written, it'd be in excess of $18,000. To summarize, the overall number of fireworks-related incidents went up this year by 45. with significant increase in non-structure types of fires, which were the dumpster fires and the grass fires. The dollar loss this year increased by $45,600, with the most identified common cause being improper disposal of fireworks. The number of fireworks-caused injuries reported went down by 5, but mortars still remain the number one cause of those injuries. The emergency dispatch complaint line was operated for 5 days this year, from July 1st through July 5th. Complaint calls decreased this year from 1,142 to 1,013 from 2019 to 2020. This year we had an average of 169 calls a day to the complaint line, and the most received was on the 4th of July with 423. If you compare that to 2019, there was 190 calls averaged with over 500 on July 4th. So our recommendations, we recommend that the City of Wichita maintain its current ordinance, and we as a department continue to seek improvement on our enforcement and our education efforts. We're proposing that we concentrate on lowering our PSA, our public service announcements, our education efforts be concentrated on lowering the number of injuries and also proper disposal. One of the new medias that we utilized this past year in trying to educate was the design of a door hanger. We distributed over 1,500 of those. We targeted our hotspot areas. We went door to door hanging those door hangers out. They were bilingual. An attempt to, they were two-sided. One side was in English, the other side was in Spanish, and it presented information on the firework ordinance itself, and it also provided fireworks safety tips. So we propose continuing to do that again this next year, along with adding the element of lowering injuries. And although the use of illegal fireworks continues, especially on the 4th, the complaints have started to decrease since the ordinance changed in 2018, which is an indicator that education enforcement efforts have had a positive impact. And with that, then I'll stand for questions.
So I might have missed it. Were there any deaths or injuries recorded this last year for misuse of fireworks?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well, but I think you said that were there any deaths or injuries?
Deaths or injuries, yeah, and that occurred through the enforcement this past year of the fireworks.
Well, there was 46 reported injuries. There's no reported deaths.
And you guys are able to educate, enforce, or encourage and enforce the rules of this for the entire city and your budget's $28,000?
Yes, we were.
Councilmember Frye.
Thank you. So it's not lost on me that to open the presentation, you said dumpster fire in 2020. This year has been that. So I'm kind of surprised that the numbers weren't worse. But to that end, you talk about grass fires being 33 and dumpster fires versus, single digits previous years. Was that maybe due to dry conditions this year?
Most definitely, yes, it was. And just, that's why we think the element of continuing education in regards to improper disposal, continuing to educate them on how to use fireworks and where they should be utilizing them at. You don't put them in a grassy area and dry right next to your house. It doesn't yield good results.
So perfect segue to my next question. With a net margin of about 13,000 and some change, and then does that go toward the education effort for next year, or what happens to that? Does that just go back to the general fund, and then does the fines from the citations, can that also be directed towards education and so forth?
To answer the question, yes, it can go for additional education, and that's our intention. Maybe not the full dollar amount. It's also if you remember when we first rolled this program out, it was to help us cover our administrative expenses as well as the cost of firefighting during this 4th of July season. And as you saw, there's 7 structure fires that we had to roll out for that were directly caused by fireworks. So it's to cover operating cost as well as to increase our education effort. And I think what the chief is telling you in this year is that we're going to ratchet it up a little bit more in education, try to be more specific to the kinds of violations that we're seeing.
Yeah, I definitely think it's having an impact, and trying to do some different things from the door hangers, et cetera, I think is good. Very targeted education, because we know where the hot spots, no pun intended, are. But continue to focus on that, I think, is good. So thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things we did in regards to those door hangers is, firefighters are always real anxious to get stuff done. We had to put the brakes on, and we didn't put them out until we patrolled on the night of the 3rd and 4th. We actually canvassed neighborhoods on the night of the 1st and the 2nd, so it was immediate. So there wasn't any lapse in time. So.
Where are those hot spots? The council member said they know where the hot spots are.
Yeah, if you look at the map, I can go back.
Slide 8 is this year's.
So it's just based on calls?
Yeah, it's based on previous calls. If the darker the color there, the hotter the spot. So like that really high area, there's an area over in Station 7's area, which is Station 7 is located at about 21st and Amadon area. Anyways, they have a significant amount of fireworks that goes on there. One of the things that we're contemplating this year is putting more than just one enforcement team in that area to try to curtail that. So
I've challenged the staff because I think there's a hot spot around Councilmember Johnson's house that's not on here. But given his preference for fireworks, I'm a little concerned that we don't have
We
that.
only use the little poppers. There's nothing going on in my neighborhood.
as a fire department, we pray for rain during the July 4th weekend.
Just want to make sure we're not unjustly demonizing like one areas over another, but it seems like it's based on calls, not just on.
No, it's based on the data that we've collected for years.
Councilmember Tuttle?
And Chief Snow, first of all, just thank you to you and your team. I say to our city manager all the time, we're so blessed to have not only you as a leader, an excellent firefighter, but also a true leader and very strategic in the work that you do. And I received less calls this year for sure than last year, and I was actually expecting more just because of the pandemic and people having more free time on their hands and all those things. The other thing I wanted to highlight is the executive summary. This is a great document. I appreciated it. And I didn't realize that the staff tested the new fireworks for compliance before the 4th of July. That was something interesting. So maybe Councilmember Johnson, maybe you can get on that team for next year and be a part of that fun. But there's a lot more work that goes on that I certainly don't always understand, and I bet the community is getting ready for the 4th of July. So thank you to you and your team and all you do to keep our community safe.
Oh, thank you very much.
So, how much are the citations, the ticket citations?
The citations are $250 a citation plus court cost.
$250?
Yeah, we learned our lesson on that. We didn't put on the little thing, $250 plus court costs. Next year on our citations, on little flyers, it's going to say $250 plus court costs. We entertained several questions on that.
So someone's using illegal fireworks, you give them a $250 citation?
I'm
If
sorry.
someone's using illegal fireworks, the citation is $250 for that individual?
Plus court costs.
Plus
yes.
court costs?
Yes.
And we work with the county through the 911. So they report to us in Wichita. There's a collaborative agreement there, or do we take the 911 calls for?
The 911 center takes complaint calls for the entire Sedgwick County and anybody else that they would partner with. And so for the last 2 years, since 2019, they've been able to separate out just the city of Wichita complaint calls from everybody else.
And then we enforce that. The county fire department doesn't enforce that. We do.
No, we enforce within the corporate city limits of Wichita.
Okay. Other questions? Councilmember Johnson.
There's 2 missing hotspots around Councilmember Blueball's home and the city manager. I think we need to get some looking into that. And then, is there any way we can add candy corn to fireworks and just get rid of all of it? Just need to do something.
Take it up Friday. Vice Mayor Claycomb.
Well, Councilmember Johnson said what I was going to say. Thank you, Chief. Really appreciate this. It's, I like to look at these two maps, and I'm sure you guys are doing this in terms of your analysis and moving forward. Can you give us just maybe a little bit of insight on the addition or the structure now of the hotspot teams and the complaint teams? And that seemed like, to me, that seems like a good thing, and particularly on things that I'm hearing from my neighborhoods, because we have, as you can see, District 6 has hotspots, right? So.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's talk about the enforcement teams. The enforcement team's composed of 2 police officers and 1 firefighter. We made that change from 2018 into 2019, and we did that because of a safety reason. The Wichita firefighters, even though we're familiar with legal and illegal fireworks, we're not familiar with putting ourselves in situations in which we can't get ourselves out of. Usually police department always de-escalates a situation before a fire department enters any type of emergency scene. And so having the 2 police officers with us, and they used 2 because we found the very first year we only used 1 police officer, and they needed backup. And I think I told you a story in which actually happened to me, in which I was put in a very unsafe position. And in fact, the police officer I was with asked me to use his concealed gun, which I've never shot a gun. So I told him, I said, it's every man for himself, and I'm running, and it's not going to be drawing your gun off your ankle. So there are situations in which we encounter very large crowds or very hostile crowds. So the 2 police officers provide the safety for us. So that's the enforcement teams. We identify the hotspots based on data, and also taking a look at our high complaint areas. So that's how we identify those. Now, we're going to have to do some work with the complaint teams, because we only had 2 complaint teams last year, and the way that we organized that was we put a complaint team on the east side and a complaint team on the west side. The problem with that is their distance of travel. For example, if you're sitting at Harry and Webb Road, and the next complaint comes in at 13th and Greenwich, it's a long travel distance, and so oftentimes the incident would have already occurred and been over before we got there. So it was just a matter of, and then of course nobody wants to be held accountable for their actions, and so our efforts were kind of they weren't very frugal in those areas. So we're going to rethink the complaint teams and do a better job this in 2021. So.
Thank you. And I don't know if you can answer this question or not. I have gotten complaints from within our neighborhoods that say that the police department can't write these tickets unless the firefighter has to write those tickets. So, on the first and second they get complaints, and a police officer shows up and they can't write a ticket. Do you know the answer to that?
Yes, a police officer can write a ticket. Okay. We just need to help educate them a little bit.
Yeah, I think we could use some of that, because I think I've asked this before, and I get that answer, and then I hear that from the neighborhoods so if we could work on that.
That's on us. We need to do a better job about educating our partners.
Thank you.
I apologize for that, but we'll get it remedied this year.
This is, as the mayor said, this is a hot topic, right, all the time, and you guys have been doing great work. I was on council when we started this enforcement effort in 2018, and it is a work in progress, and I appreciate the work the firefighters are doing on this.
Well, thank you.
Can you just describe to me a little bit the complaint team? Like, you guys actually put a team together, and does that take resources away from actually fighting fires?
No, we utilize the $42,000 that is incurred through the sale. In 2018, the council voted to actually implement a fireworks sales permit at $1,500 per permit. That's actually paid by the fireworks wholesale companies or distributors, vendors, whatever you want to refer to them as. That's who makes that pay. That money's held in a pot, and that pot of money then is utilized for the enforcement and education. Last year, the flyers that I talked about, we utilized that money to make the flyers. And then the enforcement teams are paid overtime, and they're what I do in my department is ask for people to volunteer. When you're paying them pretty lucratively, they usually put their hands up. They only have to work about 4 hours on a night. So I don't really have too much trouble obtaining personnel, and police officers do the same thing. In fact, they get paid a little bit better than we do. I think it's triple time, so.
Okay, so they get paid overtime, the permit fee takes care of that, and because they're paid overtime, it's not a resource drain.
No, it's not out of either one of our budgets. It's the $42,000 that was collected from the fireworks sales permits.
Okay, I appreciate it. I'm just trying to get a more global concept on how we enforce policy, so I appreciate you jumping into details with me on this. Other questions for the chief? See none. I don't think there's any. Thank you so much, Chief.
All right, thank you.
I wish I had a joke for the water and sewer rate adjustment now that the Vice Mayor said my joke about this is a hot topic, but I don't, so.
I have a joke for this one.
You got one?
No.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I've found over the years that the earlier we bring this to you, the better. And so today we'd like to go through the issues that will impact our recommendations on water and sewer rate adjustments for 2021. You're familiar with many of those, but Alan King is going to go through what services and what projects we finance through our rates, and then talk about the justifications for rate adjustments for next year.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Alan King, Director of Public Works and Utilities, and I'll talk clearly and slowly so you can understand me, hopefully. There have been some pressures with our utilities that tend to drive costs up, but staff has also been working hard to find areas of savings to try to mitigate that, to get close as possible to the rate projections that we've been showing council each year. And so there aren't any, good news is there aren't any surprises this year. So when we look at what rate revenue supports, we have the ongoing operation and maintenance of a water treatment plant and 5 sewage treatment plants. We have over 5,000 miles of water and sewer pipes. We employ over 350 staff individuals, including engineers, operators, mechanics, call center agents, and meter readers. And then we have a significant expenditure in our capital improvement program, which covers repair and rehabilitation projects, expansion projects, and then large capital projects, examples being the Northwest Water Treatment Plant and the sewer biological nutrient removal plant that's being proposed. And then we also have what we call our water cares and rate relief programs. Back in 2015, Council approved a 0.1% increase at that point, which carries on to today, and that generates about $150,000 a year, which we work with the H2O Cares and then also other efforts with others to try to help give relief to those people who are having difficulty paying their utility bills. When you look at how we spend our money, what it covers, about 80% of our expenses are in the capital improvement side of the business, and only 20% covers the operation and maintenance. So staff salaries, energy, chemicals, all the rest on the operation side. That's only 20%. As you can see, the big share is on funding improvements to our system to have a higher reliability and to reduce and to repair and rehab those assets that age and need to be replaced. When we talk about our capital improvement program, the 2021 through 2030 capital improvement program that you all have seen and approved, in that, $304 million are for water projects and $490 million are for sewer projects. That includes $356 million for the proposed biological nutrient removal program that has not yet been initiated. And then of that, not included in that window is $524 million for the new Northwest Water Treatment Plant. It's not included because it was initiated back in 2019, which is why you see that 304 number being lower, as low as it is. Looking ahead for the 2021 CIP development, when we have this process of reviewing our CIP, there could be a couple of things that would exert pressure to increase the CIP spending. One of them is the means for future development to support our developers, our construction building partners in the city. And what we try to do is we try to build water mains and sewer mains into areas, undeveloped areas, in time for those areas to be developed. And presently, we have about $2.7 million each year to cover water main expansions.
2.7?
Yes, sir, 2.7 per year. And $2.3 million per year for sewer. That's presently what we're spending. But we have been approached by some of the development community, particularly WABA, and they're asking the question, is that enough? And so what we're doing is we're engaging the services of a financial consultant to help us look at what it is we're doing and to make suggestions and really pose some policy questions to bring to you later to see if that amount of funding that's currently covered in our CIP is adequate. If the council should decide that that's not adequate and a higher amount is warranted, that has the potential to increase our CIP budget and has an effect on increasing rates. The other area of CIP is the unfunded CIP projects. We've identified a list of things that we think need to be done, and we've drawn a line on what is covered by rates, and we have some projects that we call below the line. We think that they're very high value, high priority projects, but they're not currently supported by the rate structure that we've been presenting to council. So what we'll be doing is we'll be looking hard at that and seeing how that competes with other priorities in terms of the total utility bill. So back to the large capital projects, the Northwest Water Treatment Facility, and thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for acknowledging the project's it's a big project. It replaces the current water treatment plant that's more than 80 years old, and once it is completed, it'll provide a new water treatment facility with full redundancy, which we don't presently enjoy with our current water treatment plant, and it has the flexibility to treat either all Cheney water or Equisped's water. We basically have two sources of water, and right now we have to blend them. We have transmission lines that come from each of those water sources. If one of those, for whatever reason, should go out of service, it has an immediate effect on our ability to produce water. With the new water treatment plant, it'll be able to use, if one of those transmission lines should go out of service for any length of time, we can pull solely from the other water source and be able to actually produce water. So it adds a tremendous amount of redundancy, not just at the treatment plant site itself, but overall system. It gives us some flexibility to make sure that we continue to provide safe water to our customers. Total project cost is $553 million. I know that when you look at the amount that was originally proposed by Wichita Water Partners, it was $494 million. But this number that's included in our CIP covers more than just that early estimate. It also covers things like $6 million design of the treatment plant, $16 million owner's rep costs that have to be paid, $12 million improvements to our high pressure pump station that it has to tie into, and then also $10 million in land costs. So that's how you get to that larger amount of $553 million. Also, that large biological nutrient removal upgrade project. And this is a very important project for us because the EPA and state KDHE, they have requirements on water discharge limits. When we treat our sewer and discharge it into rivers, they regulate what levels of, for example, phosphorus and nitrogen are in that effluent. And for us to be able to anticipate what those regulations are that are coming into effect, we're going to have to make some upgrades to our our sewer treatment plant system. And so what we're doing right now is we're putting in place plans to upgrade our existing treatment plants, and we're actually looking at the best way to use the current resources that we have to meet these new regulations. And the estimated project cost for that is $356 million. When we talk about, high costs, things that drive costs, one of the things that we did to help mitigate that was to come to identify and secure favorable financing. We actually secured the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act WIFIA loan through the APA, and were successful. And that gives us a very low interest rate to pay back the loan. It allows the deferment until payment completion until 5 years after the completion of the project. And then it also spreads the costs over a period of time and funds about half of the project. This has a very significant effect on what the costs are to our ratepayers. Similarly, the other half of the project will be funded by the State Revolving Loan Fund, SRLF. We are just now in the process of finishing up the final details of that agreement, and we will be bringing that agreement to the council for your consideration, that loan agreement. That's about half of the project. It also has the advantage of low interest rates, deferring the payment of the project until, in this case, 1 year after the project is complete, and allows the rate impact to our customers to be spread out over time.
Alan?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. I thought at one point we talked about it was going to fund 49% just like the WIFIA. Did the 48, is that a reflection of a change, or was it always 48%?
It's always been 48%.
Okay.
49%'s always been the WIFIA, 48%'s been the SRLF, and that has a lot to do with what funding is actually available. We're going to have a little bit that we have to cover through our other sources, either cash funding or revenue bonds, but this has been the contemplated mix.
But it's always been 48% from SRLF.
The smaller amount from SRLF,
Okay.
the larger amount from WIFIA.
I guess I remember it differently.
You know what, council member, just so that I don't get myself in trouble, I'll check on that and get back to you, sir.
Thank you.
You bet. So when you look at the effect of these two financing sources, you look at for example, the original conceptual amount of $524 million as funded by the customary way, the usual way that we finance projects like that. We look at how much that would cost. About $1.1 billion would be the total cost of debt and capital, as opposed to the $553 million amount. And we actually get with WIFIA 1.17%. We locked them in, we were assuming a higher percent, but we were actually able to secure 1.17% interest, which is phenomenal. And then also, when you look at the State Revolving Fund, 1.48%, which is what it is we believe will actually be locked in. This can change over time because we have to renew, unlike the WIFIA, we have to renew it over the 5-year loan period. So there could be some amount of increase, but certainly we have a high enough amount in our estimates that cover even a drift upward in terms of the cost of SRLF. So when you look at the difference between those two total costs, we're talking about $383 million difference. That's a significant impact on reducing the cost of the project and the impact on our ratepayers. When you look at the BNR, the biological nutrient remover, we're looking at the similar financial impacts with securing good financing for it, both WIFIA and SRLF. One of the things that we have looked at was when we submitted our letter of interest and actually our application, and they were approved for the WIFIA funding for the water treatment plant. The feedback that we got from EPA was, y'all did a good job. We want to do business with you guys. Make sure you submit a letter of interest for your sewer treatment plants, your BNR project. Well, recognizing kind of that favorable suggestion, no guarantees, but also recognizing the fact that we're talking about a program that's actually approved, but in a year from now, a year later than what we were talking about, it would have to be reapproved. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to crowd in front and go ahead and apply for the program under its current authorization, which means that the letter of interest would be submitted next year in April, which is really an accelerated schedule, with the application by September of 2022, and a close and actually the first part of 2023. I know that sounds like it's off in the future a little ways, but it's a whole year earlier than what we had projected before. So because WIFIA has such a significantly positive effect on our ability to finance this major project, we wanted to go ahead and move it a year earlier. That has an effect on increasing costs, but when you look at the total cost, it has a significant reduction in total cost. It increases the chances that we'll actually be able to secure WIFIA funding for that important project. So when you look at that project, and you look at the $356 million at just revenue bonds, you have the $615 million, and then if you do the WIFIA and the SRF, you see 589, you say, well, wait a minute, that's only 26 million. That reflects a very conservative estimate of 4%. When you consider what kind of interest rates we were able to get on SRF and WIFIA, the savings are considerably greater, but we want to make sure that on our financial projections, we don't get ourselves into trouble by not being able to meet it. So we are using a very conservative 4% interest rate for both of these funding sources. So when you look at the key assumptions that our projections are based on for the 2020 rate recommendations we're bringing you in this workshop, funding for the BNR is based on what is currently included in the CIP, which is $356 million. That's our best guess at the last time we did an update of our comprehensive plan, but we're actually engaged in preliminary design efforts now, and we'll get a better understanding, a more accurate, hopefully, cost estimate for the project. Also, we'll be bringing two possible approaches for council's consideration once the preliminary work is done. One will be for the lowest cost that can meet our objectives at the $356 million CIP budget, but the other one would be, but if we want to look at total life cycle costs and future cost savings, let's not necessarily consider only the $356 million. If we can save hundreds of millions of dollars by investing a little bit of more in the project now, and 10 years from now saves tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, what does that look like? We want to make sure that we look at it that way too and bring that information to council. Just trying to make a look out into the future and give council some choices. Like I said before, we've moved the project up a year earlier, which crowds our CIP schedule, but we also, we believe, decrease the risk of not being able to have WIFIA there as an authorized program when it comes time for us to apply. So we're seizing on the opportunity that we think we have with EPA to submit our letter of interest a year earlier. Also, when you look at some of the other key assumptions that go into this rate projections we're presenting you today, is we've been doing our utilities optimization efforts, and we've identified $6.5 million per year savings in our operations that we're actually putting into place. And that doesn't even take into consideration some of the other optimization efforts that we're looking at now. So we could increase that amount of savings from $6.5 million to more, but the $6.5 million is the bird in the hand, so to speak. And so we've included that in our rate projections. And then also the new lower interest rates that we actually secured, not 4%, but 2.5% and 1.17%. Those are included in the rate projections.
Alan, to that end, as you talk about the accelerated schedule for the BNR, do we have an anticipated closing for the financing on BNR?
Yes, sir. It's excuse me just a second here. Yes, sir. The letter of interest, which we have to submit first to be considered, that would be due early next year, April 2021. We would actually have to have the application complete and into EPA by September of 2022. If after the LOI they say, yes, go ahead and apply, then we'd have to have that into them by September 2022. With the estimated close date, because it takes them some time to process our application, what it is you're talking about, the actual closing of the deal, we anticipate that would be early in 2023.
Because that's when the rate is locked in, correct?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Thank you.
That's right. At the time of the actual closing of the loan. So we don't know what the interest rates are gonna be at that time.
Absolutely.
But
It's a
we're
long
assuming 4%, knowing that that's gonna be more than what we need, trying to make sure that our estimates are conservative. So those are the key assumptions that we put into what we're bringing to you for the 2021 rate recommendations. So what does all this mean? This is the line that we've shown you every year. That's a 10-year progression of what the rates are gonna be. We've always said that we'll be pretty close to 5% all the way out to about 2027, 2028, and then it'll step down, and we'll see an adjustment down closer to 4% out to about 2034, and then it'll step down to the 3%, which is kind of the ongoing cost of inflation that you pretty much have to have incorporated into your rate projections from that point forward. We should be able to step down with our current thinking in about 2034, 2035. I want to make sure that I characterize this as the percent increase in revenue. The rates are actually dependent on whether you're a residential customer, how much water you use, if you're a commercial customer. Sewer is at one rate, water is at another rate. The combined revenue from both of those utilities, that's what we're talking about here, about 5%. Now, when we brought this to you last year, we said that the combined rate would be 5.13%. That was what we showed you last year for this year. It turns out that now it's at 5.17%, so it's about 0.04% higher than what we showed you last year. But in following years, it's actually drops down lower than by hundredths of percents compared to what we showed you last year. Anytime you do a rate projection, there are a lot of unknowns. You have to make assumptions about them. One big one is how much water you actually sell from year to year, and that has so much to do with the amount of rainfall, how much irrigation people do. So we do our best in making assumptions and try to make them as conservative as possible. The point that I'm trying to make is to get so close, 5.17 versus 5.13, even though we have all of these effects of trying to drive that want to drive the rates up, really is a reflection of the work that staff has been doing to try to keep the costs down. So no new surprises here. We're still talking about something around 5%, and that is a real advantage in terms of economic development in this area. When you consider that, depending on which survey you look at, it's more like 7% for the rest of the country per year increase in revenue. And we can get you, they haven't got the survey out for this year, but if you have any interest in how we compare with other cities of about our size, we can get that information to you.
That was going to be my next question, because we've provided that before.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to see how we compare to our peer cities. I know that we are lower, but I'd just like to have that confirmation.
I can get a copy of last year's. They do it every other year. I can get a copy of last year's and look at what they projected for this year. So I can give you a last year's projection for this year.
We do show national average on a slide, in a couple slides from here.
Right, but the peer cities is where it's always more comparable.
So this looks like the rate increase is going to start going down. And when I asked that directly to staff earlier, they said it wasn't going to start going down. Can you clarify that for people who are watching?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It may be a little confusing the way that we've presented it here. This is the amount of increase each year. So it's not as though the rates are going down. The amount of increase each year is going down. So you're looking at about a permanent, even if you don't do these other projects, about a 3% increase every year just to cover the increased costs of utilities, materials, inflation, that sort of thing. So although this graph steps down, and one could see that think that this reflects rates going down, actually what it does represent is the amount of increase that you experience each year is going down.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that was clarified for those watching, because it says projected rate adjustment. So yeah, I think it's easy to confuse it with rates are actually going down, but just the amount of increases will go down in comparison to earlier increases.
Yes, sir, that's exactly right.
So rates will go up at a slower rate.
Yes, and hopefully we'll get down to that maintenance of 3% increase each year. That's what we're trying to get to eventually. So what does this mean to the ratepayer? To increase the amount of revenue that we have to collect, it means that we have to increase rates for different classes and types of customers. So if you look, this is the chart that we show you each year when we make this presentation to you. When you look at residential, for example, it depends on how much water you use. So typically what we show you is a low, mid, and high user, and we give it gallons per month. The 2020 cost was, for example, let's pick the mid one, kind of an average residential user. The 2020 cost combined, water and sewer, was $73.27. We're talking about an increase for next year that we're proposing that takes it to $76.92, which is a combined water and sewer rate increase of $3.66 per month. Well, that becomes bigger, of course, as you use more water, and certainly when you look at commercial, it's based on water volume. If you have a kind of an average, if there is such a thing, commercial customer of 100,000 gallons a month, their monthly combined water and sewer bill goes up $31.33. And then, of course, industrial is a much bigger user, and the expected monthly increase for water and sewer would also be greater. So like Bob said, the combined rate increase, that red line is the national average. We believe, looking at some of the resources that we've been looking at, that a conservatively low amount that we could report to y'all is 6%. Some sources say it's as high as 7%. Assuming that it's the 6%, as you can see, the proposed rate increases that we're talking about are below what the national rate increases are. So our rate projections of 2021 are within 0.04% of the rate projections shared last year, and the following years are a little bit lower than what we shared. What we're trying to do is to hold to the rate projections that we've been showing you each year to make sure that there are no surprises. So the next steps are that we're to return to City Council with a recommended rate increase in the form of an ordinance back on the 17th of November. We wanted to make sure we, like the manager said, get it to you early enough in case you have some questions or want us to look at some other aspects. It gives you the time. It isn't for a rate increase. That rate increase wouldn't go into effect until the year 2021. So we got a little bit of time. The current plan is to bring it back to you on November 17th.
Mr. Mayor, I have a few comments I'd like to add to his presentation before we open up to questions, if that's all right.
Go for it.
I just want to thank the staff and the council for this long journey that we've taken. 10 years ago, the council was looking at double-digit increases, and in fact, one year, actually, I think it was 10 years ago, we had to adjust rates in mid-year in addition to our normal end of or beginning of year. So that's the kind of condition that we were facing, and the council rightfully asked to see some change in methodology so that we could tighten up our operations, but more importantly, come up with predictability for our rates. So during the last 10 years, there have been a number of things that the council's approved, that staff's brought forward. One of the most important things is we changed our methodology to minimize the impact of conservation. If you remember, there were constant criticisms about every time that we had a rainy period or people had irrigation systems, irrigation wells or whatever, that we were selling less water and rates were then increasing in a corresponding manner for those conservation efforts. We've now moved away from our modeling that relies so heavily, that actually recognizes the benefit of conservation and helps us in terms of feeding the predictability of our rates. Also, we inherited a system with significant deferred maintenance because of concerns about rates, and the staff has done, I think, a wonderful job of working through to determine what our deferred maintenance needs were and to address those over a long period of time in the capital improvement program, and the council has supported those initiatives. We also knew that we had problems with our two plants, with the water plant as well as BNR problems that we were facing that seemed 10 years ago almost insurmountable and now are affordable. And the staff also went into a pretty significant effort to optimize our operations and have brought recommendations forward to you on optimizing on procedures to optimize our operations. We couldn't have done this without the partners that we've had. EPA and KDHE have played a significant role, as Alan outlined. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the effort of council. You have really rolled up your sleeves and become much more involved in some of these important issues to the point where I think you've actually been a great extension of staff and have done some really heavy lifting, especially when it comes to working with EPA on the WIFIA. You're now a known quantity in the EPA offices, and I think they actually look forward to our visits. And I want to obviously thank our congressional delegation who have been involved in this, as well as Jim Davenport, who represents us in DC and has played an active role in all of this. But when you look at almost a savings of $400 million just because of the financing, that's really significant for our ratepayers. And again, I just wanted to make those comments. I think people tend to forget how far we've come in really a relatively short period of time with our utility.
Bob, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So last week, as Councilmember Johnson mentioned, when we did the groundbreaking for the new water treatment plant, which was just an honor to be a part of, I was sharing with you that the largest facility our city has built will be the largest facility in my lifetime, so really something to celebrate. We had a representative from the EPA there who was extremely complimentary of our City of Wichita Public Works and Utilities team. And did I hear him correctly say that this was the largest project they were funding in the nation?
I think he said the largest water project.
The largest drinking water project?
Drinking water, yes.
Yeah, so that was something I think that's just noteworthy to the community to know, and that how, again, extremely complimentary he was of the City of Wichita, came all the way from Washington, D.C., so he could be part of a very windy groundbreaking. So.
All right, any questions for staff?
I have one, Mayor. To the mayor's point and to what Bob just said, when we have this presentation, can we highlight again where we would have been? I forget what you called that chart, but it showed that if we didn't get the funding that we received, what water rates would have been. Yeah. For anybody who's asking about our rate increases right now. So I think the mayor's point is a good one for folks who may not be caught up to where we are right now.
And also, could we get staff to, I guess, look into programs to help offset the cost of water for people who fall into certain economic levels, particularly people on a fixed income, people who, who it seems like it's costs more to be a Kansan now than it ever has, and are there programs other cities are taking advantage of that might actually be able to help some of our people who economically are more disadvantaged?
Mayor, the council actually approved a program to help with those residents a few years ago. I'll let Alan talk a little bit again about that program, H2O.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, yeah, we back in 2015, council recognized that it was more expensive every year to be a resident here, recognizing that rates were going up, and so council approved a 0.1% increase. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually generates $150,000 a year. We were a little bit challenged with finding a way to get folks to take advantage of that money, and probably a lot of that is just our inefficiency in getting the word out. We have some partners that we work with. Water H2O is a very important partner, but we've also been working with Salvation Army and others, and looking for ways to get them to help us to actually spend the money that we have available. But we are continuing to look for ways for us to help the lower income. And most recently, the manager, and I think the mayor, has challenged staff to look at, is there a way for us to identify those folks that would normally be just fine with paying their bills, but through the COVID situation, could we identify those people that have been hit recently by the COVID? And I think we've got some information. I've provided it to the manager, and I suspect he'll be providing it to you to see if there's an opportunity there that we might want to consider in helping folks with their utility bills.
Well, very, very good to see that we have from a bucket of money to help us offset the cost of water bills. I'm wondering when it comes to getting the word out, it's possible we can look into actually printing something onto those water bills, letting folks know if you are someone who economically has trouble with increased water bills to call this number or to go to this website. I mean, if we already have the resources set aside, but they're not being utilized as well as they can, I'd hope that we could come up with ways to ensure they get utilized to keep people in their homes and keep their utilities on. So it sounds good. It sounds like it's going to be a further discussion though. Other questions? All right, no more discussion. Thank you. Mr. Manager, does that conclude the workshop?
Yes, it does, Mayor.
All right, well, I hereby call our council meeting back into order. And with that, I will give the floor to the Vice Mayor for a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the City Council recess into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss legal authority of municipalities relating to public officials pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 for legal consultation with the city attorney, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship for legal advice. And the executive session is required to protect attorney-client privilege and the public interest. Oh, sorry, I got to do the times. The executive session will begin at, I'm going to begin at noon, so at 12 p.m. and end at 12:20 p.m. and the meeting will resume in City Council chambers.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, and I believe it needs a vote. Clerk, open the roll.
Aye.
I don't think we have the rolls on.
Yeah, we have to do by voice.
Yeah, we have to do
Aye.
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 I will be abstaining from the vote and also from this closed session. The ayes have it. Guys, 12 o'clock.
executive session, and we would like to extend for another 20 minutes. So I move that we extend executive session for another 20 minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. That would be, do I need to say a time now? 12:42. We will resume back in chambers at 12:42. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Same sign. Okay.
Second session, and I will recognize the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. We have returned from executive session and taken no binding action. I would like to make a motion that we hold a special meeting this afternoon at 4 p.m. in City Council chambers on a resolution regarding public officials.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Since we don't have our devices on, all in favor of said motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes do have it. We are adjourned this meeting, but because 4 members of the council has requested for a special meeting at 4 o'clock, that is within our 2-hour, or beyond our 2-hour requirement, we will have a special meeting at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Mayor, you gotta make a.
Oh, apologies. Yeah, we probably should do a motion to adjourn, though. You're right. So I do move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you for making sure we're crossing our T's.